Hey everyone! So today I'm going to be introducing you to a new project of mine called ArmaGarden. ArmaGarden at its core is a garden-themed base builder. Survive each round by defending a flower in the center of the map. It's unique in that you have to balance spending resources on building plants and enhancing your character. So thanks for tuning in, and let me show you what progress I've made. ArmaGarden is a solo project, and I've been working on it for a few months now. I'm using Unity to make the game, and all of my art is done in Photoshop. To start off, let's go over some of the core game mechanics. First is my little scientist character. He doesn't actually have a name yet. He does have two major functions. One, being able to fight off enemies himself, and two, creating static defense to protect the center flower. I'll get to art and animations, but as far as programming goes, he has a simple attack in the cardinal directions. He also does a brief stun on every third hit. Right now, he can spawn two types of plants. The first plant is a resource generating plant that drops energy every once in a while. The energy has to be picked up before it disappears as an incentive to keep the player moving around the map. The second is an attacking plant that attacks an enemy near it on a short cooldown, and it also attacks in the cardinal directions. I've also implemented a system that only allows you to build plants on buildable ground. It's a little hard to tell because I haven't drawn any buildable ground in yet, but don't worry, it's on the to-do list. Another core mechanic I haven't implemented yet is an alternative way to spend your energy. Right now, the only way to spend energy is on building plants. I plan on adding a system that allows the player to spend energy on buffing himself. This way, you constantly have to choose between buffing your character and building plants. This lets the player follow their playstyle. I'm going to be adding diminishing returns to incentivize a balance between the two. Don't let that stop you if you want to go all out on one or the other. I want to touch quickly on level design. The level on the screen right now is designed for early stages of the game. It has two narrow chokes that are easily defended. Later levels will be more open and more zoomed out. There will be fewer chokes and less obviously defensible areas. Also, there is only one enemy on the screen. The idea is to have waves of enemies to fight off. Next up, let me show you the two enemy characters I have made so far. I'm hoping you can tell I'm going for a theme with my enemies. They are plant-animal hybrids, and I thought it would be a fun way of making them. I do have a story in mind, which I'm sure I'll get to in a later video. It was the main inspiration to the plant-animal enemy theme. First up, we have the leaf lion, which, surprise, doesn't have a name either. I have some fairly simple AI code set up on it right now. It does a jump attack when it gets to a certain range. It then runs randomly to one of the four corners for a few seconds before going back to pursuing the player. The leaf lion ignores plants and just goes for the player. Its AI definitely still needs work, but I'm pretty happy with how it's functioning so far. Next up, we have the pineapple gorilla, who is a bit of an easier, simpler enemy. It does a check every few seconds and pursues whichever plant or player is closer to it. If it gets close enough, it does an attack. I added a buffer range to the plant, so if it's attacking a plant and the player walks by closely, it'll switch to the player. I have an attack animation finished, I just haven't coded it in yet. If you have a cool idea for a plant-animal hybrid enemy, let me know in the comments. Last up, I want to talk about my biggest challenge so far, which has been art and animation. I'm definitely a programmer before an artist, so I had a hard time deciding on an art style. I often hear people say, don't worry about art until the end, which makes sense. This approach didn't work for me though. In order for me to stay motivated, I had to be producing something that got me excited. I started out with vector art using Inkscape. For the animations, I used single sprite bone-based movement. This produced a more cartoon style. I used this style for a month or two, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I just wasn't happy with how things were looking. Eventually, I decided to move to Photoshop. I knew I had to put in the time and crunch out some art I was truly happy with. It wasn't easy, but with some practice, I went from this to this. To be fair, I followed a YouTube tutorial for this tree, but everything else I did on my own. So yeah, that about does it for this video. If you're interested in exactly how I did my animations, I've been thinking about doing a tutorial sometime down the road, so if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I have a Patreon set up if you'd like to further support me. Mid-tier supporters will get a monthly updated playable version of ArmaGarden. Other than that, thanks for checking out my first step towards making my first game. I'll see you all next week.